Hey guys, Taki here. If you're in the market for a new budget handheld, you may be overwhelmed by all of the options that are currently out there. Knowing the form factor that you like helps to simplify this a bit, but you can easily waste hours sifting through everything that is out there. In this video, we will focus on a small selection of budget handhelds that all have the same form factor. This is going to be a deep dive video, but it should hopefully have all of the information that you need. Let's get into it. For this video, I selected 4 handhelds that will typically fill the same role as either a first emulation handheld or a smaller emulation handheld. These would be the Miyoo Mini Plus, the RG35XX, the R36S, and the RG35XX Plus. Let's start with an overview of the specs on these. I have these grouped from low to high in terms of their performance and capability. When it comes to the emulation capabilities on these, they occupy the same space, but the RG35XX, R36S, and the RG35XX Plus can all run more systems than the Miyoo Mini Plus because they have a GPU. On the CPU side of things, the Miyoo Mini Plus has the weakest configuration by far, but it's good enough for the systems that it can run. The RG35XX has more performance and a more powerful Cortex processor, but it can get toasty on the higher end when you push it. The R36S and the RG35XX Plus are both better in that regard because they can do a lot more without generating a lot of heat. RAM is kind of inconsequential on these, but the 1GB of RAM for the R36S and the RG35XX Plus will allow them to run more applications and heavier UI than the other two. All of these have dual SD card slots for their OS and ROMs with the exception of the Mini, but they all have the same size screen and the same size resolution. Battery capacity is all over the place with these, and I would say that it's not super important. Each of these units will have different amounts of power draw, so a smaller battery on one may go further than a bigger battery on another. Connectivity is an important point, and the Miyoo Mini Plus and the RG35XX Plus are the only handhelds in this bunch that have built-in Wi-Fi support. The RG handheld has support for Wi-Fi 5, but the Bluetooth 4.2 support is more useful when it comes to emulation due to the limited control set that we have. Next, I want to go over the pricing of these, and again, I have them sorted from low to high. These prices change all of the time, so check out the links down below for updated pricing. I am using US-based pricing for this, so just be aware that if you live in a country that has VAT tax, it will be higher than what I'm showing. The RG35XX has the cheapest pricing at the time that I'm making this video, but that is only for new users of AliExpress. I put a range of pricing for this to include discounts like that, compared to prices offered directly by the manufacturer. I also put shipping information. For the RG35XX, we have a range of pricing starting at $32 with a max of $70 with free shipping included. Up from there, we have the R36S with a base price of $32.27 with free shipping, and a regular price of $47 with $8 shipping for everyone else. After that, we have the Miyoo Mini Plus. This one is more annoying to get a hold of, but it goes for $53 up to $57 with free shipping included. The RG35XX Plus is the most expensive device on this list, and it will set you back $70 regardless of whether or not it comes with free shipping. Again, these prices can fluctuate a lot depending on the sales that are currently active, so use the links down below for updated pricing. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the meat of this video, and we'll kick things off talking about the controls and the build quality of these 4 handhelds. There's surprisingly a great deal of variation between all of these devices, and there is one that is the clear winner here, but let's just go over each individual part one by one. When it comes to the size of the D-pad, these are all pretty close together. There's only about a 1mm difference between all of the ones that are here, with the RG devices and the R36S having the bigger D-pad. With that D-pad, we also have a few different styles. The RG35XX and the R36S both have a similar feeling D-pad in that they have edges that aren't really smooth, so if you're going to be playing a lot of games that you need to roll the D-pad constantly, it's going to feel a bit annoying to use either of these. The D-pad on the Miyoo Mini Plus is much better in this regard with really nice rounded edges, but the new RG35XX Plus isn't far behind. The physical feeling of using the D-pad is quite different on these. The only ones that are similar are both of the RG devices. In terms of stiffness, the R36S D-pad is by far the worst. If you don't DIY this, it's going to feel really rough to use this. I've already gone ahead and done that, but it's still worse than these other 3. Both of the RG devices use the same conductive rubber for their D-pad, and it's not the softest that I've ever used, but it is serviceable. When it comes to everyday use, I think the D-pad on the Miyoo Mini is much better. It's soft and it's comfortable. And a lot of this also transfers over to the face buttons. Again, if you don't modify the R36S, those buttons will feel really bad. I've already done that, so they don't feel bad, but they're not as good as these other ones. Both of the RG devices are better in terms of stiffness than the R36S, but they don't feel as good to use as the ones that are in the Miyoo Mini Plus. We also have menu buttons on each one of these devices. The menu button on the R36S doesn't work, so we can just ignore it. I personally like the feeling of the menu button that's on the RG35XX more than the Miyoo Mini Plus, but it doesn't really matter. In my opinion, the start and select buttons also feel better on those devices than the other two. There's also a lot of variation when it comes to the back buttons, and I have these sorted from best to worst, with the R36S being the worst out of the bunch. They're not terrible, but they're not as good as the other three. They make a very loud noise when you click them, and they don't feel great to use. The 35XX is the next one up from here. These make less noise, but they're not as comfortable to use as the other two. The buttons in the Miyoo Mini Plus are the quietest out of the entire bunch, and they also don't make a rattling noise that you can hear in the other three. I'll show you that in just a bit. Before recently, these were my favorite buttons in this form factor. They feel really good to use, and I like how they differentiated the buttons from each other. That being said, I think the 35XX Plus has the best buttons from a day-to-day use due to the new design that they've implemented. It feels good in the hands, and it's easy to access either button. This kind of ties into build quality, but as I mentioned, the shoulder buttons on these three make a lot of noise, and I'll just demonstrate that so you can hear it for yourself. The Miyoo Mini Plus isn't perfect, but it makes significantly less noise than the other three. This rattling noise isn't the end of the world, but it does make the device sound kind of cheap when you're using it. Moving over to the case quality, there's not really a clear winner out of this bunch. I like the feeling of the shell on the Miyoo Mini Plus the most, but they're all really good. There's no bad one in the bunch. All of these are smaller handhelds, so you don't usually get amazing ergonomics, but let's see how that stacks up. I'm starting out first with the Miyoo Mini Plus, and I want to point out that none of these are like really terrible when it comes to ergonomics, but depending on your personal preference, smaller devices like the Miyoo Mini Plus might not be the best option for you. That being said, I probably would not buy something like the R36S if I was buying something for a very young child. I would limit my options to these three. I view the Miyoo Mini Plus as a pick up and play device, especially if you use Onion OS, where you can just like pop out of a game by pressing the menu button. If you're going to be playing for longer than that, then you might be better suited with one of the other handhelds that are here. If you've never used any of these emulation handhelds before, but you've used an official console, then I would say the Game Boy Pocket is really the minimum size that I like to go for in the handhelds that I play. On the Miyoo Mini, they kind of cut off the bottom here, so you don't have a lot of room to rest your back fingers on. You can still get by, but it's not as good as the other ones. Up from there, we have the 35XX, which isn't as good as the Plus, but it is within the same size of the Game Boy Pocket. Having this bottom section here really makes this more comfortable to use in the hand, and I like how similar it is to a Game Boy Pocket. In terms of ergonomics, I think the 35XX Plus is a bit better than the normal one because of this redesigned shoulder button layout. This feels a lot better to hold in the hand, and it's easier to use. But if I had to select one as the best for ergonomics, it would definitely be the R36S. The shoulder buttons could use some work, but the whole device is more comfortable to hold in the hand. This device can play a lot of different games, and I like being able to switch from the D-pad layout for retro games like this, or something like this for games that need an analog stick. All of these have a single mono speaker, so headphones will be your best bet if you want to get the best audio quality possible. That being said, it's still important to be able to use the built-in speaker. In this section, I want to do some audio comparisons between all of these to find out which one delivers the best audio quality. We'll use the audio from two different games for this, and I'm going to mic up the mono speaker directly so you can hear the difference for yourself. This would be a great time to grab a set of headphones. Anyway, that's the audio test. I'm not going to pass judgment for this section. I'm going to leave that up to you, and I'm interested to see what you guys say. I think it's pretty obvious which one of these is the worst one, but I think it can go either way for the best one. After sound quality, we will move over to picture quality. As we saw with the specification section, all of these use the same size screen, but they don't have the same panel. For many of these, companies will go through a few display providers over the life cycle of a handheld, and there's even a lot of variation in the components that a single screen provider will deliver. That being said, I still want to compare all of these together, but you should always keep in mind that budget devices like these do not have the same quality assurance standards or validation standards as products from larger companies. As long as a screen can work, it will be used on the assembly line. No one is rejecting screens because the colors don't look perfect. A few of these panels are pretty bright, so I had to change the ISO on my camera so that way we can see a clear difference between these. So here we have the title screen for Super Mario World, and I tried my best to get this to sync up. There is a bit of variation here, but you should be able to see some differences between all of these screens. Right off the bat, I think the screen in the Miyoo Mini Plus is by far the worst, and this is with Onion OS. If you use the stock OS on this device, the picture is not clear at all, and it looks really bad in comparison to these devices. When it comes to the two RG devices, the original can get a bit brighter, but this could be due to Garlic OS. Between the two of them, I think this one looks better, but it might not be that obvious in this footage. Out of all of them, the screen in the R36S is my favorite. It's a bit brighter than the other ones, and it also seems to have a higher contrast ratio. When I was getting set up for that Super Mario RPG footage, I could see that there were a lot of black textures that were darker on this screen than the other ones. However, if we just exclude the Miyoo Mini Plus, the rest of these screens are perfectly adequate. For our second title, we have Spyro Year of the Dragon, and a lot of the things that we said about the last game carry over to this one, except that I can see that this R36S has significantly more contrast than the other devices. It also seems to have more saturation, especially in the greens and the blues. I'm going to do a close-up shot on all of these screens to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. This is really the only one of the bunch that doesn't stand up to the rest. I want to briefly talk about the connectivity of these devices. The Miyoo Mini Plus and the RG35XX Plus are the only handhelds in this bunch that have Wi-Fi functionality, and that's going to be the most useful for net play if you want to play two-player games with two handhelds. You can do it with two of the same handheld, or you can do it with two different ones, but it's easier to do everything with the same one. The Wi-Fi spec is a bit better on the RG handheld, but it doesn't do much for us when it comes to simple co-op. For the other two handhelds, you can gain Wi-Fi functionality with the help of a USB dongle, but I'm not a fan of this route. It's a lot easier to go with a device that has Wi-Fi built in. Beyond co-op, you also gain the ability to do retro achievements. This is a cool quality of life feature to use while you play through your retro games. However, out of all of these handhelds, the RG35XX Plus is the only one with built-in Bluetooth support, and that's going to be useful if you ever want to dock this and use it with a controller that has analog sticks. The two RG devices are the only ones that have Wi-Fi support, so if you care about a simple docked experience, the RG35XX Plus is the better option of the two. The next thing that I want to talk about is software. If you're new to handhelds like this, it isn't really that important, so don't get hung up on it because it can be a rabbit hole at times with all of the options that we have. 3 of these handhelds have been out for a while, and one of them is a hardware clone that has seen almost all of the development that it will ever see, so this shouldn't change that much. What I want to do now is just briefly touch on some of the options that you have for different operating systems that can run on these handhelds. With the Miyoo Mini Plus, we have the stock OS, which is what I have installed here, but we also have 3 other options. Typically, we would classify these as being custom operating systems, but these are more or less customizations of the stock operating system that comes with the Mini Plus. It's not a fully open platform, but developers were able to make some meaningful improvements. Out of all of these, Onion OS is probably the best. It has a bunch of quality of life improvements, and it's kind of the gold standard for smaller handhelds. It's super easy to use, and it has a lot of room for tinkering if that's what you're into. The RG35XX is the next one up from here, and it has support for even more systems. This has a mix of real operating systems to choose from, as well as improvements on the stock OS. My favorite is Batocera, but I have the stock system and Garlic OS installed on my other 2 units. The Batocera build is the closest that you will get to the systems that run on more expensive handhelds, and getting used to it in this one will make it easier to transition over to other handhelds in the market in the future if you ever want to. The R36S comes with ArcOS, which is similar to that last system that we looked at. This one is my favorite type. By default, it's plug and play out of the box, but you can configure this thing for days with support for hundreds of themes and configuration options. If you like to customize your handhelds or tech products, this is a great option to go with. There's a second operating system for this, but it is very similar to ArcOS. Finally, we have the RG35XX Plus. At this point, this runs a stock OS and Garlic OS 2.0. The stock OS is much better on this than it is on the Miyoo Mini Plus or the RG35XX, and it also has full support for all of the hardware that this comes with. It gives you a simple menu to navigate through if you don't want to mess with configurations, but you can also boot into a full RetroArch system that you can customize to your liking. The only con is that theme support isn't as robust as it is on other handhelds at this point. Garlic OS 2.0 is another option that you can go with, but this one is super limited at this point, so you really want to wait for future updates to come along. If you like the look of Bato from the RG35XX, that should make its way over to the RG35XX Plus, and that will make it a nice complementary option to the stock OS going forward. So we've touched on a lot of topics in this video, but I have saved one of the most important ones for this point: performance. Depending on what you want to play, the gaming experience can be very similar no matter which of these options you go with. For example, if you want to play Game Boy Color on any of these, the performance will be about the same. So in that sense, it doesn't matter which device you go for. When we start adding things to this, or we want to run some emulators that require more power, that's when we can start to see a difference. I don't want to go too far in the weeds with this, but I do want to give you some concrete examples. Let's say that I want to play Pokemon Ruby for the GBA. I want to grind out some levels as fast as possible, so I plan to turn on Fast Forward. Using Fast Forward will push each of these devices to the limit, and when we enable it, there's a decent gap between all of them, with the RG35XX Plus leading the pack. Now you have to imagine, over the course of a full playthrough, this faster speed will add up to a lot of time saved grinding out levels. For the next situation, we want to play PS1, but we want to play it with enhanced visuals. To do this, we will turn on the Enhanced Resolution option, which will increase the rendering resolution. With this option enabled, the game looks much better, but it only runs at 60 FPS consistently on the R36S and the RG35XX Plus. We could do many more examples with stuff like rewind support, shaders, or very demanding games. Generally speaking, you'll have way fewer limitations on the R36S and the RG35XX Plus. We did not touch on higher end systems like N64, Dreamcast, or PSP. Our top two devices are pretty close for those three, but the RG35XX Plus does not have an analog stick. If you care about those systems and you know you don't want to map an analog stick to your D-pad, or you don't want to use a Bluetooth controller, my advice would be to just go with the R36S. It has all of the buttons that you need to play those systems, and you'll have a much better experience. Let's wrap up this video with some of my closing thoughts. Hopefully by this point you have a good idea of like which one of these is for you based on all of the stuff that we covered, but if you don't, I have some advice that might help you out. Let's go one by one. For the Miyoo Mini Plus, I think this is a great device if you're going to be buying a handheld for someone that's younger. Let's say you have a kid that's like 5 years old. This one would be the one that I would get for them, and I would just install Onion OS on it, and I would turn off anything that I didn't want them to mess with. The experience is going to be good, the buttons won't be hard on their hands, and it will be a comfortable gaming experience for them. If you're on a budget and you want a full set of controls and you don't need everything to be perfect, then I would say go with the R36S. It's cheap, and it will allow you to find out what you like and what you don't like early on without having to spend a lot of money. I don't think it's worth considering the RG35XX anymore now that the Plus exists, but it might be worth buying if you can get this for a really good deal. If you don't care about having analog sticks and you just want to have a lot of power in this form factor, then the RG35XX Plus is the best thing that's on the market right now. If you know that you want to do anything that requires Wi-Fi, like co-op functionality, then I would stick with these two. I don't think it's worth buying either of these and using a dongle. That experience isn't great. So boil down to the simplest that it can be. Buy this one if you want the most power in this form factor and you don't care about not having analog sticks. Buy this one if you're on a budget and you want to be able to play all of the games that it can support. And buy this one if you're looking for a gift for someone that's younger. But really, you can't go wrong with any of these. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at a video that I did on the RG35XX Plus. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.